The session is research infrastructures in the life science domains. So we will have also representatives from other research infrastructure and an open discussion on the ESRI landmark and on the position that EPTRI can take in the wide landmark. The first presentation is from Daria Julskorska. Thank you, Daria, for accepting to participate to our meeting. Daria is the European Joint Program on Rare Diseases Coordinator. She works at INSERM. And so, Daria, the floor is yours. Thank you. Daria, we cannot hear you. You are muted. I'm sorry. Daria, okay, please go. Thank you. Daria, we still cannot hear you. Daria, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear. Your microphone was red, but now it's green, but we still cannot hear you. Maybe you could try to also to write in the chat just to understand what is happening. Yes, otherwise we can send you a telephone number where you can connect. Daria, would you like to try again with your microphone? No. Oh, so it doesn't work. We are sending you a telephone number in the chat. Hope you can join. We have sent you.
Hello?
Hello, Daria. We can hear you very well.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm sorry, but that's why I was worried, before that I had a problem because I had no possibility to activate my micro at all. So I do not know what happened. Well, anyway.
What a pity. I'm sorry. Okay, so please, you can go.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate and to present on how the European Joint Program on Rare Diseases can support pediatric research. I would like to also congratulate you for the meeting and all the achievements. I mean, I've been following this since this morning. I think it's really very exciting. So the next slide. I don't know if I can move them myself. Yes, so this is just a very quick reminder about the rare diseases landscape. I'm not going to focus on every element here, but I just wanted to underline that the research infrastructures, the European research infrastructures, are very important part of the rare diseases research, and also the rare disease services that are being provided to rare disease community. And for the rare diseases, we have the ones that are really, let's say, rare diseases specific, like the Orphanet, RE-Connect, or the new platform of the European Commission that is dedicated to rare disease registries, but also other type of infrastructures that are like EPTRI, not necessarily rare diseases specific, although we can imagine that, of course, pediatric research is very much connected to rare diseases, because the majority of rare diseases are pediatric. So that's why those infrastructures are very important. The next one. So this is just a close, well, not full representation, but let's say the majority of the representation of, what EJP RD represents today in terms of partners. So although we have 87 beneficiaries and about 50 linked third parties that reflect on the participation of 35 different countries, we have also different types of stakeholders that are involved in the EJP RD, and the infrastructures, of course, are also part of it. I reflected here on the ones who have already the status of ERIC or let's say legal, they are independent legal entity. But in total, we can say that that EJP RD today represents about 85% of the rare disease community in Europe and beyond. The next one. So this is, again, just a quick view on how EJP RD is organized, and this is why I'm showing this to then, show you also how the infrastructures are involved in the EJP RD. So as you can see here, we have this coordination and transversal activities that are reflecting on all the activities that are taking place in the EJP RD. And then the rest of the activities is divided into four different pillars: one on funding, one which is dedicated to the development of the virtual platform, dedicated to the coordinated access of data and services, to the capacity building, which is capacity building and empowerment, where the training activities take place, and finally the acceleration of translation of research and therapy development and clinical trials. The next one. So here I put the EPTRI logo and not a specific infrastructure logo, because I just wanted to show, how much actually a research infrastructure are today involved in the EJP RD and at which level. So it really spans from the coordination and management, because the infrastructures are also part or represented in the operating group of the EJP RD. They are, of course, involved in the strategy, sustainability. They contribute to the development of and support for all ethics, regulatory, and IPR issues. They also support us for the communication and dissemination. And then, as you can see here, they are also relevant for many different activities taking place in different pillars. So actually, we cannot say that at least what we are trying to build in the EJP RD is really in the very close connection with the infrastructures. And I'm talking here about the infrastructures in general, because I think that whatever is happening, I would say, for one, it also has a great impact for the others, and of course, it means also, the let's say the recommendations or the good connection that we can establish with, for example, EPTRI. The next one. So if we just have a quick look on how actually we support, at least at the current stage, the pediatric research. As I said, pediatric research or pediatric rare diseases are, of course, part of the EJP RD, because we do not have a specific focus on any specific group of rare diseases. But I would say that there is also no, let's say, for the majority of the activities, there is also no a specific, I would say, focus on pediatric diseases. But if we look at the different activities, so we have the EJP RD Central Help Desk. So the idea here is that we support any incoming demand, and that, of course, it can be demand related to including the pediatric research. And our goal is not to replace the already existing infrastructure, so for example, EPTRI, the C4C project, or the European reference networks, but to redirect and to find the best expertise whenever it comes, whenever the demand comes through our central help desk. We also have our advisory, regulatory, and ethics board that can support the demand in relation to the pediatric research, and again, the expertise of the involved partners is then requested whenever needed. For the funding activities, there are no targeted calls. But pediatric research, as I mentioned already, this can be financed as any other, let's say, research project. And different types of funding that we propose may also support specifically pediatric community. For example, in the Work Package 7, which is dedicated to the supporting of the networking and sharing of knowledge, there is a possibility, for example, that the pediatric community also applies for this kind of support. And in that case, that we target something more specific about pediatric research. We have now, it will starting from year 3, thanks to the involvement of TEDI, but also the partners supporting EPTRI. We will have the dedicated training that will be dedicated to the young patients. So that's something that will start starting from the January next year. We also work on integration of the specific contents in the innovation management toolbox that we have. And of course, we have also the pillar for clinical trial support office, which is run by ECRIN, but of course in close collaboration with C4C and also PetScreen, in order to again avoid duplication and ensure that the pediatric expertise in clinical trials is supported by the most, let's say, relevant expertise and partners. Next one. So next one. So this is, I'm going to show you very quickly the results of the EJP RD survey. So these results were gathered, or this specific task is done by our colleagues from Italian Teleton. So it was done by Mary Wang. And so we ran the survey in 2019 and 2020. The first one was targeting specifically European reference network. The second one, more, let's say, global rare disease research community. So the idea was to gather the maximum of the feedback for their needs, but also about their awareness of, let's say, standards, but also research infrastructures. The next one. And so here, this is just to show you, when they were asked, what is the main purpose of their current research. As you can see, of course, there are some maybe small discrepancies between the European Reference Network and researchers, which actually is good because it means that there is a real complementarity also. But as you can see, discover both, the development of new therapies, the identification, the natural history studies, biomarker studies, the improving of diagnostics, development of models or understanding of disease mechanism, and also the innovation in the improvement of care. Next one. So when we ask them also which type of services that would be of most importance for them, as you can see, the facilities like, for example, biobanks, biosamples, cell lines, but also support to conduct translational research are one of the most that come out as the most important ones. And then, of course, depending, let's say, on if these are coming from their European reference networks, or let's say from more basic research community, we have maybe some additional needs, for example, to finding patient registries or support conduct of clinical trials, which will be more relevant for the European reference networks in contrast to more basic researchers. Next one. And so here is I would say, in a way that, and I'm sorry for that, but I think that this is where the lessons come. The most sad, in a way, result, say, if we ask them about the the different resources, including different research infrastructures, and if you see, you know, how much of them actually know about them, about the existence, or is using them, unfortunately, this is very, very low. And so the goal also of the EJP RD is to make sure that, of course, the use and the knowledge about the research infrastructures is being increased. And so this is something that we already try to implement. And I'm just going to show some examples on the next slide. But I think that that's why it's also so important about, you know, how we go forward also and collaborate together. Thank you very much. So what are the actions that we are currently implementing to enhance the usage of research infrastructures by the rare diseases community? So what you need to know is that we are strongly encourage the use of the research infrastructures and provide the links to the respective infrastructures in our calls. So they are really part of the recommendations to the applicants. We also try to promote the contribution of infrastructures in EJP RD training. So, for example, I know PBMRI is participating in the training of biobanking. The ELSI is also contributing a lot to the trainings that are related to the data or verification. We have also, as I mentioned, the direct services that are developed in EJP RD by participating infrastructure. So we have the EPTRI mentoring service that supports the innovation and translation of research results, that which is currently open to the projects or researchers from the project financed by EJP RD or ERA or from the European Reference Networks. And as I mentioned previously, we also have this clinical trial support office, which is run by ECRIN, but also with the support of the ERNs and for the benefit of the rare diseases community. So we have also the direct involvement of different infrastructures in the development of the EJP RD virtual platform, because it's important that we make sure, you know, that this platform is also reflecting on the resources that those infrastructures are representing, but it is also really tailored to the needs of the users. So if the users community, meaning the research community, tells us we need to understand, you know, how to reach to a, I don't know, specific competences, or we want to use some specific, let's say, resources, then it has to be reflected also in the structure of the virtual platform. And then we try to organize, of course, the webinars and workshops. So this will be done, for example, this year at the occasion of the EJP RD General Assembly. So trying to reach as much as we can from the rare disease community, but also previously we had the possibility to participate in workshops that were organized in collaboration with the European Reference Networks and the European Commission to help in increasing the knowledge about the infrastructures and their services. The next one. Okay, next. Yeah, so this is what we are planning, and this is actually where your input would be also extremely important, because, you know, we need to understand also better, you know, how we can support you and also pediatric community in the future, or so I would say in the medium term and in the long term. So by medium term, I mean from starting from now and until the end of the EJP RD, which will be in 2023, at the end of the 2023, but also in the next phase of the EJP RD, meaning that will be translated to the Rare Diseases Partnership under Horizon Europe. So for the moment, what we are trying to see, you know, how this can work is actually for the funding opportunity. How can we pass from encouragement to something which is mandatory whenever it is possible? So, for example, through a direct inclusion of the services from different infrastructure in the funding cycle. So we are currently testing, for example, the use of mentoring services that was proposed to the applicants and not only to the funded project. So meaning, you know, really try to involve infrastructures as early as possible, also in the construction of the research project. And then we also plan other type of more tailored and enhanced, for example, trainings and communication campaigns. So the trainings that can be developed with, for example, with the support of the ERNs and tailored to their needs through the specific work packages. So for us, it will be work package 17 or the work package 20, which is on the clinical research. We also think about providing a mandatory trainings for young researchers that will be participating in the funded projects to make sure, you know, that they are trained in a way in advance, so they are aware about what's available there, what they can use, how they can use it. And also we are going to start producing a dedicated videos and use case stories again to support the research infrastructures and their usage by the rare disease community. And I think that was my last slide. Yes, thank you very much. So I'm afraid that I will not be able to answer to any questions because I need to run now because I have another meeting that I cannot miss. But we will be happy to answer any of your questions if you or liaise with you. So don't hesitate to write us to the coordination or through the help desk. Also, it works very well. And thank you very much again for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Daria, for the excellent presentation. It is absolutely clear how we already work together, but need to increase to strengthen collaboration between all of the actors in the framework, European research area. Of course, I also follow your invite, and I invite everybody to keep this discussion later on also offline. So we will lead this process by sending to everybody presentations and invitation to further discussion and so on. But of course, also interacting directly will be extremely useful. So now we can go to the next presentation. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Daria. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Viviana Giannuzzi. She's a member of the Pediatric Committee at the EMA, working at the Gianni Benzi Pharmacological Research Foundation, and her presentation is about ethical, legal, and social issues in pediatric research with a proposal for an ELSI pediatric service.
Thank you, Donato, for the introduction. Can you properly hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, please, the next one. Yes, this is my disclaimer. Next one, please. Thank you. So briefly, we just discussed on the need for the quick availability of health products for children that should be adequately studied and used, in spite of the well-known difficulties that pediatric research has. Next, please. The pediatric research should be based on specific regulatory provisions that should address the pediatric specificities of children and then of the research in the biomedical field. Exists a lot of regulatory and ethical documents at international and European level that should be complied with while performing pediatric research. Next, please. Furthermore, if we have a new formulation to develop, we need to comply with further provisions related to the development to manufacture of formulation. If we have an orphan drug, we need to comply with specific orphan rules. If we have an advanced therapies, we know that we have finally gene tissue therapies also for children, and we should think about the nature or the genetic nature of a lot of pediatric diseases. So we have this new product even on the market. We need to comply with further regulatory and ethical requirements. And as we heard today, we would like also to have validated biomarkers. So it's the need to validate them from the regulatory point of view in order to properly perform research in pediatrics and to properly use drugs and medical devices. Next, please. So in the research and development process, we have to comply with so many requirements, starting from the preclinical phase. where we, from the ethical point of view, we need to comply with the rules, we need to comply with the 3Rs principles, meaning that we need to reduce the number of animals used in the experimentation. We need to use the most appropriate practices to minimize their suffering, and where possible, we need to also replace animal studies with appropriate methodologies. In fact, studies with animals should be justified, even from the ethical point of view. Next, please. If we jump to the clinical research, first of all, we need to involve children in the clinical research, since from the setup of the design of the research. Of course, we have an heterogeneous population, so with different ages and maturity and capacities. So we need to comply with these requirements. Next, please. And this is true all across Europe, where national rules apply, especially in the context of the informed consent and assent. So the complication is much more relevant in this field, as the EMPRIMA itself has demonstrated. Next, please. And furthermore, in the clinical setting, when we are performing pediatric studies, it means that we are aim to collect samples, data, and possibly we want also to transfer them across boundaries. And in these fields, we also need to protect children from, with regard to their rights, but also we should try to minimize pain, discomfort, fear, and distress. For example, minimizing the volume of blood-brain drowning, using microinvasive procedures, and also limiting the study-related procedures as the necessary as much as possible. Next, please. Of course, we are also obliged to comply with the data protection and confidentiality, because we must guarantee privacy, especially for children that are a particularly vulnerable population. Not only to protect their rights, as said, but also to share common standards and practices. Even in this case, we may want to share data, even across, not only across European countries, but also outside Europe. And for this, we need to comply with the GDPR. The GDPR, with specifically considering specifically children, states that subjects above 16 years of age may consent to process their own data, and possibly at national level we can have also lower ages. We need to inform properly them in a clear and plain languages. And given that we are really want to use secondarily health data, this should be done in the proper way and in compliance with the highest requirement. There is another issue that has been clarified by the GDPR, that children may be less aware of risk and consequences and of their rights. So when they reach the age of legal competence, they may want to remove data and so avoid the secondary use of that data, for example. Next, please. Among personal data, we have genetic data that require further ethical implications because we need to implement specific procedures within the informed consent and access process. and also while collecting this type of data when we want to store them and have access to them. In fact, investigators should explain specifically this use. And in addition, we may have also a much more use of occurring of incidental findings. So all these issues arise further ethical issues as well. Next, please. So these are the ethical and regulatory issues that may arise in the pediatric research during the research and development process. The regulatory and ethical issues as naturally evolving and need for continuous updates. In fact, during the EPTRI surveys, the ethical and the regulatory support has been identified as a need for support, for service, for expertise, and also one of the main barriers to performing research. In fact, it is very relevant because we are dealing with a non-profit research. We need to comply with those requirements, not only if we are registering a medicine or a medical device, but we need to comply with all these requirements, even if we are performing academic non-profit research. Next, please. So things considered, and for all these reasons, a research infrastructure dedicated to pediatrics should provide support and expertise to deal with these provisions, and also should promote the participation of minors and of families according to the age and mental capability. Since the research design, as we said before, this is of course would minimize research misconduct, protect children's rights, and finally can facilitate the translation of basic research findings into medicine and devices. Next, please. So, given that EPTRI has research platform dealing with pediatric medicine discovery, biomarkers and biosamples, developmental pharmacology, pediatric medicines formulations, it includes the topics that are listed on the right side of the slide: non-clinical research, clinical procedure, consent and assent, data protection, biosample handling, genetic testing, advanced and new products that I mentioned and I detailed before, as the topic relevant from the ethical point of view that should be addressed or must be addressed considering pediatric specificities. Next, please. So the research infrastructure should address these issues in the pediatric research setting, providing a multidisciplinary expertise, because of a lot of topic and of field to be addressed. And this could be done through research activities, because, as I said, the regulatory and ethical setting requires a continuous update and renewal through a support, providing knowledge through an help desk, and providing training in order to increase awareness on these issues and push for the implementation. Next, please. This work is fully complementary to other existing initiatives and is to be set up to cover existing gaps according to the topic to be addressed and the competencies offered by the different initiative and research infrastructures. Next, please. For example, for aspects related to biobanking, the cooperation with EPTRI that already have an existing ELSI service would cover pediatric ethical needs. And the BBMRI tools and quality criteria could be integrated in pediatric sector. Next, please. For aspects related to clinical trials, pediatric ethical needs could be addressed with a CRAN, and its regulatory tools could be integrated in the pediatric sector. Actually, we have done a similar exercise in the framework of the PEDCRIN project, when we try to release a tool to manage biosamples deriving from clinical trials. Next, please. We have included all these considerations in a deliverable of EPTRI that details the ethical and regulatory framework and needs. Here we suggest a model of governance of ELSI within a pediatric research infrastructures that includes research, the help desk, and the training, as I mentioned before. Next, please. To conclude, our research infrastructures devoted to pediatric research will help to address the great amount of ethical and legal and regulatory uncovered issues related to research with a translational approach in pediatrics. This can bridge between preclinical and clinical research and development and strengthen the efforts avoiding duplications in research. In this way, we'll save time, we speed the availability of proper health products for children. And also another key point is the availability of quality and robust data to develop pediatric medicines and medical devices. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Viviana. Very good presentation and open discussion on the best way to address ELSI issues beyond clinical aspects, so in pediatric translational research with its complexity. And now it's a pleasure to introduce Michael Rice on behalf of INFRAFRONTIER, and describing also the interest in pediatric research of this very well-known established research infrastructure. So Michael, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. I guess you can hear me clearly, yes, I hope. Okay, thanks a lot. So could I have the first slide, please? Thank you. So I guess, well, I do not need to remind this audience about the contribution that animal experimentation and also particularly animal experimentation involving rodents has made to major breakthroughs in understanding very many of disease mechanisms in cancer, metabolic diseases, diabetes, inflammatory diseases, and many other disease areas. Can I have the next slide, please? So INFRAFRONTIER is, as Donato already said, an established research infrastructure in the field of the generation, the phenotyping, archiving, and distribution of mammalian models for human diseases. And currently we have 29 partners in 15 countries, and these partners provide input to this research infrastructure on different levels. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is basically what INFRAFRONTIER provides to the research community. It provides access to physical resources, to analytical platforms, but also to knowledge, expertise, and data. And I would first like to describe a little bit this access to the physical resources. So the INFRAFRONTIER is operating a large biorepository. Next slide, please. This is the European Mouse Mutant Archive, acronym EMMA. And so this is a place where researchers, usually after they, for instance, have concluded a research project, can then archive the resources that they have created in this project in this European Mouse Mutant Archive. Very often these are publicly funded resources. Currently, EMMA holds more than 7,300 mouse strains. It's a distributed repository, so we have 16 EMMA centers across 13 European countries, but there's one central access point. And then upon request, these mouse strains can be will be distributed to researchers across the globe. Next slide, please. So as already said, currently we have about more than 7,300 lines archived. So it's the third largest mouse repository worldwide. There's the two largest are both situated in the US. And then there's also other continents like Asia, there's larger repositories. About half of the lines that are archived in EMMA are from large top-down projects like the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium, which I will allude later to. And the other half are from individual depositors from the scientific community. Next slide, please. And as I already said, we are distributing globally. As we can see, most our mouse lines or mouse strains go out to Europe, but then many also to North America, Asia, and Oceania. So in total, we have shipped more than 6,000 mouse lines to date. Next slide, please. So the other part, where it comes also to access to technology platforms and is exemplified here. So this is a scheme of a so-called mouse clinic. So what mouse clinic are phenotyping facilities that try to really cover a whole system view of a specific, for instance, of a specific mouse strain of a specific mutation. So these are screening pipelines, usually non-invasive screening pipelines across different disease areas and organ systems. So usually we cover more than 500 parameters in these phenotyping screens in order to provide a maximum information using a minimum amount of animals. And what is also very important, to get this whole organism, so systemic view of a certain mutation. Next slide, please. This is an example of a scheme of a phenotyping pipeline used in the IMPC project, which I will also come to, as already promised, in a few minutes. What I would like to mention here is two things. The first one is that this particular pipeline constitutes an early adult and a late adult pipeline. So as we can see, so for the area of aging, there's already a whole component of tests included. And of course, one could also think further and see what requirements, what specific requirements are there by the pediatric community. On the other hand, I would like to point out on this little box in the very left. So there's also a whole embryonic pipeline included, which is not expanded here, but after an assessment of fertility and viability, and particularly if the lines are sub viable, then a whole amount of testing would be done in the embryos. Next slide, please. Okay. For the sake of time, I actually took out one slide from this presentation, which I usually include in the slide set, but also to make the connection to the last presentation, I would like to also mention here that, of course, I mean, as a basic requirement, INFRAFRONTIER centers, of course, comply to all the national and European regulations on animal testing and animal experimentation. But in addition to that, we also fully adhere to the 3R principles, and we also try to actively promote those, and also particularly in areas like refinement of testing procedures, reductions of animals. We have really made large progress, which we also share with the research community. And finally, what is also important for us in that respect is that by offering centralized or access to centralized gold standard resources, we also contribute a lot to reducing the number of animals that are required in an animal experimentation. And very often, and we will see this in a second with the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium, the data is made widely and openly available. Next slide, please. So I would also like to exemplify here 3 international collaborations of INFRAFRONTIER. And the first one is this International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium that I have already mentioned several times. This is a global consortium, as we can see from this scheme, from this map, and the European component is run by INFRAFRONTIER partners. Next slide, please. And the goal of the IMPC, the International Mouse Phenotyping Consortium, is really to build a full comprehensive catalog of gene function in the mammalian genome. This helps to really elucidate a lot of the dark areas of the genome. It's surprising for how many genes we have no idea about the gene function. And so far, more than 6,000 mouse lines have been phenotyped, and more than 84 million data points have been created. And I should say that the IMPC uses a standardized phenotyping pipeline in a standardized genetic background in the full knockouts. Next slides, please. So the next one, international cooperation or European collaboration that I would like to mention is EOS-CLIVE. Next slide, please. So this is a project where the European research infrastructures connect to the European Open Science Cloud. So you see here the logos of the different research infrastructures that are included in the project. Next slide, please. And the overall aim is to provide fair life science data and data workflows to the European Open Science Cloud, and in the case of INFRAFRONTIER, of course, provide and connect our data to the data of other life science communities. Next slide, please. And the last cooperation is EJP RD, but Daria has already mentioned that. So this is the structure of the project. INFRAFRONTIER, next slide, please, is particularly involved in this work package 11 about providing a virtual data platform. But I think Daria has explained that in full detail. Next slide, please. But yeah, maybe what to mention in terms of rare diseases is that INFRAFRONTIER also we try to provide structured information for specific research communities. In this case, the rare diseases, where we put together the resources and services that we can provide to these communities. Next slide, please. This is just also a recent example about such a collection of resources for COVID-19 research from INFRAFRONTIER. Next slide, please. One way where we to interact with different stakeholder communities are our annual conferences. So with different focal communities. As you can see, we had already targeted personalized medicine, rare diseases, but also gene therapy. Last year, we had also genetic variation, big data, and aging. And the next one, next slide, please, will be focused on the topic of cancer. It will be held in Brussels in October, and it will be a mixture of, due to the pandemic circumstances, we will have a presence, but we will also have a remote participation possible in that event. Next slide, please. A few examples of how INFRAFRONTIER is also already involved in pediatrics research. So this is an example from for Finker disease. So a novel early onset multi-organ syndrome, and INFRAFRONTIER EMMA has provided the mouse model for these studies. Next slide, please. And here an example where one of our mouse clinics, the German mouse clinic, has phenotyped a specific model in this case for the gracile syndrome. Next slide, please. And I guess with that, I would be already at my last slide. So what we have seen is that INFRAFRONTIER, and I have showed examples that we offer targeted resources for specific communities, and that this is very important based on their feedback and input. And one of the input mechanisms or feedback mechanisms would be, for example, these conferences that we hold. INFRAFRONTIER is already involved in and provides resources for pediatrics research, and as such we recognize the importance of this research field, and we are absolutely open to input from the pediatrics community on both on how we can improve our resources and services to make them more suitable for pediatrics research, and also of course to explore avenues how we can even better cooperate. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Michael. And I would like to say how much we are interested in working together with the other existing research infrastructures. In the project currently ongoing, at the end of the first phase of the design phase of EPTRI, 3 research infrastructure were involved: BBMRI, IATRIS, and ECREN, and a survey was conducted within 8 biomedical research infrastructure to collect useful information about their expertise and services useful for pediatric research, for developing common services, or for integrating activities. And we had some discussions, conferences, and also this today roundtable is aimed to sort out some kind of collaborations plans between existing research infrastructures and the pediatric research community. So thanks, Michael, for having explained very well also this concept. Now